from. By this he was giving them a sign that he had insight from the Holy Spirit. He was giving them a sign they didn't even ask for, that he was who he said he was. He gave them a sign. He saw right through them, and he let them know it right off the bat. Called them hypocrites. Why do you test me, you hypocrites? Then he said, show me the tax money. Now, this was not done in secret, by the way. This was wide open. They wanted all the people gathered around Jesus that he's teaching to hear. They want them to know. They're going to show him up. But Jesus says, show me a piece of tax money. So they brought him a denarius. That's just a small coin, probably about the size of, or like we would use a penny. Just a small coin. And he said to them, whose inscription? Jesus is now holding this coin, and he says, whose inscription? Whose picture? Whose name is on this coin? They said to him, Caesar's. And he said to them, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. All of a sudden it was clear to the people around what their responsibilities were. This is a subject that had been debated for probably centuries, literally. They had been debating loudly, long, about the taxes. Should we pay taxes? Should we not pay taxes? And there was, this was part of that debate between the Sadducees, the Herodians, and the Pharisees. A big debate. All of a sudden, it's clear to the people. Now, a couple of things that are really important out of this. Jesus is really saying to these guys, and I think they got the message. If you had been loyal to God all along, you wouldn't be paying taxes. Wrong. They got that message. You've been loyal to God, and done what you were supposed to be doing, you wouldn't be paying taxes to Rome. You wouldn't have Roman soldiers standing out here at the gate of the temple with their swords and their spears. You wouldn't have their flag flying over your city. You wouldn't have the Roman soldiers marching up and down your streets. Pretty important point. Another one is when he says, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, but to God the things that are God. He's placing God above Caesar. He's letting them know that there may be times when it is appropriate to not follow what the government says. When is that time? When the government's instructions oppose God's law. When they tell me when, where, and how to worship, for example, they're out of place. God is above. It is my responsibility to follow God's law. But as long as the government is not doing that, then I have a responsibility to the government. A good prime example, I like to drive on the road. I like the roads to be fairly decent to drive on. It costs money to make that. So, I've got to support it. There may be other times when I disagree. We're in the midst of two wars. There's probably most everybody in this room has some disagreement with some aspects of it. Do we we have a responsibility to support it still? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And definitely to support our troops. But I think of some of the communist nations, how they have told people, you cannot worship. We don't want you worshiping at all. There's people had to go underground to continue to worship. Many governments have attempted to do that. So render therefore to Caesar what's Caesar's, but to God what's God's. When they'd heard these words, they marveled, left him, and went their way. They didn't know what to do. They couldn't respond to that. They just walked away. Well, now, in the background are the Sadducees. Sadducees have been watching this, and as soon as they see it, they come in. They're coming in for the kill. Who are the Sadducees? What is it they believe? The Sadducees claim to believe the Bible much more, the Scriptures, which would be basically our Old Testament. They claim to believe it much more than the Pharisees. Now the Pharisees were very rigid. They had all the things that you were to do and all the things you were not to do, and you know, everything was very, very rigid.
They had a rule for everything.
They had a rule for everything. And if you could think up something that they didn't have a rule for, well, then they'd make one for it. And Jesus accused them, the Pharisees, of how do I put it? Anyway, he accused them of ruling, running not following God's rules, but their own rules, creating their own rules. Yes. He accused them of following their own rules, the rules of man, rather than the rules of God. Okay. The Sadducees were much more liberal in their beliefs, but they claimed to follow the Scriptures much closer than the Pharisees did. They did not believe in angels. They did not believe in resurrection or life after death. They believed that God created the world and He set it in motion, and He went off somewhere else and left man to run it as he saw fit, any way he wanted to. And whatever you got on earth while you were alive here, whatever you got, then that's it. That's what you got out of life. So they really didn't care much about anybody else. It was all about me. Whatever I could get out of life, whatever pleasure I could get, whatever wealth I could get out of life, that's all there was. So go for all you can get. And you think about that. Ladies, how would you like to be married to a guy like that? You know, whatever I can get out of life, that's it, you know. And he really doesn't care much about anybody else other than what he can get for himself. He who gets the most toys wins. So the Sadducees were a smaller group than the Pharisees. The Pharisees were by far the larger group. Sadducees were a smaller group, but they were the wealthier group. They had a lot more money. Most of the priests were Sadducees. And it almost always the high priest, they changed every year. This was not God's design, by the way. But they got a new high priest every year, and he bought his position. So Sadducees almost always got it. Paid for that position. But they had to serve with the agreement with the Pharisees not to espouse prominently their beliefs. That was the only way they could get along sufficiently, because of their smaller numbers, that the Pharisees would allow them to serve. But just because of where they were, it did get espoused to some level anyway.